All right, so before we get into the reviews of the other properties that have been going on, I wanted to revisit a movie that came out last, I guess when this is coming out, maybe a couple weeks ago, but it is Joker Folie. I think about a week ago it came out. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, right? Because I think you've probably, if you're watching this clip and if you're listening to this podcast and if you're a regular member of the Access Blockbusters community, you've heard me talk, you've heard other people talk. This is not a beloved movie. Let's just put it kindly. It's not a film that has garnered much praise, is, another way to put it. Joker Folie Deux has had its moment in the spotlight, and I think that is more for worse than for better. But I wanted to revisit the film a little bit in light of some things that have come out, but also just to kind of, I have some more thoughts about it in light of, what has been coming out recently about just what happened behind the scenes. And then also just in light of what I think the movie was trying to do, because I also want to give the movie its due. And I want to explain just in further detail, because I recorded that review literally an hour after I saw the film, because I wanted to have my thoughts as fresh as possible to talk about it. So I want to articulate better, I think, what I have been thinking about when it comes to Joker Folie Deux, listening to other people's reviews after I posted my own, and just thinking about it in the context of what this movie could have been. So there have been details that have come out that basically Todd Phillips was given free reign. There were no test screenings, and he could do whatever he wanted. Also, interestingly, this movie came out of a dream that Joaquin Phoenix had. I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't really matter to me. The part about this that I think is interesting is that Todd Phillips was given full control of this movie. Now, I don't want to dwell on that too much, because I think that that's interesting in and of itself, but it's also not that interesting to me on the other hand, because I think that, sure, there are plenty of movies that come out where the director has full control, and I think that Todd Phillips is perhaps not somebody who should have been given full control. I don't think he's at the level of Steven Spielberg, who can say to a studio, let me do my thing, and they will. They'll let him do his thing. And I just don't think Todd Phillips is at that level. And I think that that's fine. I just think that that was a mistake that was made on many fronts. But I think we ended up with this movie where Todd Phillips essentially just got to execute his vision for this movie. Full stop. That's it. Now, in terms of what I think Joker Folie Deux was trying, or could have been, rather, because I don't want to speak for Todd Phillips. I don't know what he was really trying to say, but this is what I took from the film. I mentioned this a little bit in my spoiler review, in my non-spoiler and spoiler review, that I do believe genuinely that there is a brilliant movie in here somewhere. And I'm taking these from themes that I thought about, as the movie had ended. I'm thinking about this in terms of what I was gleaning from certain moments of the film. And here's what it came down to. There is a really good courtroom drama, psychological thriller that is inside this movie. And I want to say quickly that, by the way, if I'm not rejecting any criticism of this movie and saying that you're wrong for thinking a certain way. So what I'm about to say is more just me maybe gently pushing back and saying, I want to hear more about where this is coming from, because I disagree. There are people, and I've had friends who talk to me about this and say, this is a movie where nothing happened. And I think that's fine to say in the one sense of, sure, I mean, physically nothing happened. Maybe this is sacrilegious. I don't think that much happened in the first movie either. Honestly, that's not that, I didn't give this movie a great review. I didn't love the movie at all. But one of the problems I had with the movie was certainly not that nothing happened. I think that, there are movies that don't need a lot to physically be happening, right? I think the courtroom drama itself was fine enough to have a story. I think that there are other problems within that format that made the film a little bit confusing and like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? Et cetera, et cetera. That, yeah, I agree with that for sure. But the argument that people are making to me, this is a movie where nothing happened, I don't quite understand that. That's really not one of the problems I have, because I think that within this film, this is a film where you're trying to follow. I think what Todd Phillips was trying to do is really follow Arthur's psychological state, and then his grappling, I guess, if you will, of what was going on in his mind, and also his emotions, and eventually get to a place where he understands his personas as Arthur and Joker and what that did to society, etc., etc. Again, if done effectively, I don't think so, but I just don't love the argument that this is a film where nothing happened. I say that a lot with television shows, by the way, because sometimes there are 30-minute episodes, I'm looking at you, Mandalorian, where literally nothing happens to progress the story. But that's what I mean, like progress the story. There's an overarching story that's going on, and nothing's being done to push that forward. Like, a lot happens in that frog egg episode, for sure, but to me, nothing happened to progress the story. This is a self-contained film, and it had a story, and I think that that's not really what the problem was with this film. But I think, right, those moments, I mentioned this in my review last week, there are moments here where I genuinely thought there was a good movie there. The courtroom stuff, especially towards the beginning of the courtroom stuff, and I think before the courtroom dance number, really interesting and psychologically interesting to me, to see how the world is trying to represent Arthur and Joker, and he has to stay silent. And then I think even the idea that he wants to speak for himself was interesting, right? Really interesting. And on top of that, the psychological manipulation of Harley, trying to manipulate Joker into coming out just for her own gain and her own fun, and her being a liar and her lying to try to get what she wants, I think is all super interesting. It all gets buried, though, under all of this other stuff that's going on in the film. But I think that is super interesting. And all that to say, within that context, like I mentioned last week, the themes of this movie, to me, do actually genuinely build on the themes of the first movie, where the first movie was trying to say, this is what happens in a society, in a world, where we spit upon and we oppress people who are downtrodden and not given a fair shot in life. That's the point of the movie. Whether or not you agree with it, whether or not it resonates with you, different story altogether. I'm just trying to say, I think it's pretty obvious that's what the first movie was trying to say, amongst other things, because that's literally what Joker says at the end of that movie. I forget what the exact quote was, but it's like, what do you get when you get, somebody who's mentally ill in a society, whatever, you get what you deserve. He said that in a more graphic way, but obviously, that's his point. You get what you deserve, right? That was the point of the first movie. I think the second movie then was trying to expand upon it, and people have been reading into this and saying it's Todd Phillips biting back at people who love Joker. I don't know, maybe, but I think that the expansion of this theme and saying that what happens now is that can be true, right? That can be just as true, but we're not trying to justify what he did. Joker did terrible, terrible things. Again, this is different from me saying the execution was flawless, because I think that all also got buried there. But that was the point of the scene where he was in the courtroom and he was talking to Gary Puddles, and Gary Puddles said, "You ruined my life. You were nice to me, but then you ruined my life." Right? I think there are two things in contrast here that have to be squared, but there's a lot of tension there. The fact that this is a man, Arthur, who society just threw him away and just did so many terrible things to him, his mother, society, people, right? And, on top of the fact that he had some mental struggles and mental illness, that, this is a big deal, right? That society did this. But it's also true that Arthur did terrible, horrible, awful things. He killed 6 people, right? And the point of the movie is that was Arthur. That was not, there's no schizophrenia, at least as far as I could tell in this movie. Because again, sometimes it's hard to tell what, Todd Phillips is trying to say is real and what's not real. But I mean, I think the point of the movie, at least what Todd Phillips was trying to say, is that no, it was Arthur, who is an amalgamation of all these different things that have happened to him, but he still ended up doing terrible things. Now again, this is not me trying to justify the movie. This is me trying to say that when I tell you I believe there was a good movie buried somewhere in here, I genuinely mean that. Again, I have no intention, no desire of watching this film again, because I, at the end of the day, don't believe that movies should be, you shouldn't go into a movie and then come out of it and say, I need to rewatch that because that movie had good intentions. It is totally fine to be like, I can see a good movie in there, but I just believe that I just didn't like it and I don't want to watch it again. That is totally fine. That is how I feel with Joker Folie Do. I don't ever want to see this movie again, frankly, because it just didn't work for me and it wasn't a particularly enjoyable watch. But I also want to say that I do lament the fact, is what I wanted to say at the end of the day, that I do believe that there was brilliance and there was something interesting to say in this movie. And whether or not we enjoyed it, I think that, I think that there are a lot of interesting things to think about here as well. So Joker Folie à Deux is going to go down as probably one of the biggest disappointments in general, critically, financially, that there ever was. And I think that that's a shame, because even though I personally am not someone who loved the first movie, I acknowledge that there were great performances and whatnot, great social commentary. I just didn't enjoy the first one. I'm disappointed. I want every movie that I watch to be really great, and I just wish that I liked this movie more. But I ask you guys, what do you think about what has been going on with Joker Folie à Deux since its release? Have you thought about the film any more since you watched it, and what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below.